But, you know, we did that when he was on the very raunchy late night show, which, you know, I co-hosted. That show was on after 11 o'clock at night. And it didn't rerun. It wasn't on an 8-hour cycle. It was on regular broadcast television. It was not something that children were just going to stumble on. I would not create that kind of programming for hours that kids are reasonably supposed to be up. Not because I think I was doing anything wrong, but I think that childhood is precious and kids grow up way too fast these days. So, you know, that's the difference between saying show some discretion and don't do it at all. You know, there are times and places to do things. And I think that this sort of uproar is why I've backed away from comics. I just found I couldn't enjoy comics anymore because it felt to me more and more like too many stories were people trying to make big gripping points instead of just trying to tell a good story. And it's so refreshing to move over to video games and talk to developers and hear over and over and over again, we weren't really trying to tackle an issue, we were just trying to tell a story that meant something to us. And I love that. I mean, issues end up in works because, you know, people are people, and if you create a good character, that character is more than you intend. That character takes on a life of its own. That's when you know you've got a great character, right? And, you know, it's so much more refreshing to have that sort of purity and innocence in video games where, you know, developers are just going, I don't know, we liked it. As opposed to, we were making this point and we were making this representation. That's for the scholars and that's for the critics to do. And it's great if a writer or an artist wants to tackle something as a personal challenge. That's great. But you have to be very careful that your work of art is not propaganda, and propaganda is a massive skill, right? I mean, hey, good propaganda is good propaganda, but if you're not trying to create propaganda, and most people don't want to have to buy propaganda, they want a story first, and they want characters first, and they want things that happen to people. You know, stories are things that happen to people. They don't want to feel like they're having a political agenda forced down their throat. And too often in comics, it was, you know, Hawkman, the right-wing guy, versus Green Arrow, the left-wing guy, or boys versus girls, or the death of Batman. I mean, comic book covers were the original clickbait, weren't they? Like, it was, Batman dies! We know Batman isn't dying, but, you know, we end up going, but what is this really about? And comic book covers stopped being about what the stories are about because they're done at the same time as the stories, and often the comic book cover artist gets a very vague synopsis, and this is what the book's kind of going to be about, draw this, because, you know, it's being written concurrently. It's not like the thing gets written and then they see the script and then they create something that's evocative of it. No, they're in the dark. And so just more and more and more, and then I started reading the same stories in 3-year arcs. When I started going, I've read this before with slightly different characters or a slightly different outcome, and that happened multiple times. I felt like comic books were just taking my money without giving me an actual new product. And, you know, that, ugh, this pose is so last year, I felt like, ugh, this story is so last year or so 3 years ago. And all the reboots and the, you know, we're gonna make, you know, Thor a bisexual antelope sort of thing. It's temporary. I don't feel like I'm getting to know a new character. I'm getting to know a character better. They are just creating variations on a theme so they can go back to that theme because the whole thing is stale. And You know, I am always very uncomfortable when people start talking about censoring books and things like that, because I remember being, you know, a kid and being a teenager and reading things that were probably not super appropriate for me age-wise. But I was one of those odd kids that was just an old soul, and not only, you know, not only hyper intelligent, I was very curious about people and the way people interacted with each other. So the Sweet Valley High books and the Degrassi books and all those books, which were, or even stuff like Judy Blume, I didn't have any interest in those teen angst things. I was saying I was beyond it sounds arrogant. The sociopolitics of teenagers had no interest for me when I was a teenager. I wanted to make up my own mind about how I associated with my peers, and I wanted to make up my own mind about what I thought of the world and what I thought was going on around me. I didn't want to emulate fictional teenagers, and I didn't feel the need to relate to fictional teenagers, because even then I'm like, oh God, I'm a teenager, I'm a relative idiot. I, you know, wanted to read, you know, stories about people who did something awesome with their lives, not just who was gonna go to prom. You know, like I loved Sherlock Holmes when I was that age. Or I liked, you know, there were these choose your own adventure books and the time machine books, and so they go and see dinosaurs and fight space vampires and all that stuff. That to me was worthwhile reading, and you know, some people would consider that junk, but at least, you know, it was like, this is imaginative, and these are stories about people doing big things, and I wanted to do big things as a teenager, and so I wanted to read stories about people doing big things, not, you know, oh, she's prettier than her, and she's thinner than her, and oh my God, Chad wants to take her to the prom, and not me. I mean, oh my God. And that is, unfortunately, there's been this merging of the superhero genre and that, you know, oh, who's he gonna take to the prom genre. And I get it. That is female fantasy. And the thing that's concerning to me is that female fantasy is still, it's indirect power. Right? I won't say it's submissive, because it's really not. It's all about a woman being so desirable that this guy who is allegedly way out of her league takes notice of her, right? That's the standard plot of these teen romances. Awkward girl, you know, catches the eye eventually of popular guy. He dumps popular girl because awkward girl has more substance, or in the case of Twilight, smells good. That's kind of the gist of that, you know, teen girl crap that is digested all the time. The problem is still that the value of the female protagonist, take, you know, Bella Swan from Twilight, the value of the female protagonist is all inherently based on whether a boy likes her or not. And that is a message we send to, you know, women over and over and over and over and over again. And, you know, we certainly don't get that in this, you know, Gwen, the Spider-Gwen thing. She doesn't give a crap what he's doing back there. You know, yeah, look at my butt, dude. Like, whatever, you're a child. That's what this says to me. Her face is, he's doing it again. And that's what I like about it. It's sort of, and you know, her butt does not look like Pac-Man. That's awesome. It looks like a butt, you know? And she doesn't look like she has spina bifida. So, you know, if you don't know what spina bifida is, maybe this is an opportunity to learn about a truly terrible disease. But, you know, these are the questions that this brings up for me. And it's tricky because I don't want to, there are a lot of people really upset about these things, and they're learning by doing, and that's okay, you know. I was at a point where I didn't understand these issues as well as I do now, and I said some stupid stuff, and I sort of see that reflected in people doing this debate now. And we all sort of go through it. What I really am dismayed by in these things is a lack of dialogue and a lack of any sort of moderation. I mean, the dialogue is happening indirectly, but what I see too often is instead of there being, you know, what I try to do here is, okay, here's the image. Let's go through it calmly and in kind of a joking manner. Like, let's not go about the whole thing. And sometimes there's a time to rant. A cartoon isn't really a time to rant. And, you know, I like putting things up and doing side by side of that versus that. I mean, which head is better placed, which neck is a more human length. I think that's kind of which ass looks more like a human ass. I think that's fairly easy to say. I mean, even the arms are drawn much better on the Cho version. But, you know, that's the kind of stuff we can take a look at and actually ask, you know, it's okay to ask the question, is this image sexist? Because we kind of came to the conclusion it uses some sexist techniques, but, pardon the pun about the but, you know, and this is a wonderful example of an artist using a sexist, like, trope, so to speak, to say something about how silly the whole thing is, instead of, you know, that dreaded reinforcing of the trope. Because if you actually look at this image, who's missing body parts? Spider-Man. He's just a head, like he's deliberately designed to look goofy and cartoonish. So if anybody is being minimized here, it's Spider-Man. He looks like a dork at this moment. He's not together, he's not in control. She is clearly in control. She's dominating the frame. He's the one that looks like he's gonna, you know, fall to his comical non-death any minute. And, like, to me, this is, aren't men silly? Not aren't women objects for our amusement? And to me, that distinction's incredibly important, because the first thing we have to do when we're getting into these very contentious issues, because the vast majority of the population identifies as either male or female. There are a small portion of people who are other, right? They want us to call them they, you know, they're gender fluid or, you know, intersex. But most people either see themselves as a man, you know, anatomical or not, or a woman, anatomical or not. So we have to recognize that we're not having an esoteric discussion here. We're having a discussion about a binary issue, meaning 1-0. You know, there's two sides, two clear sides. We're having a debate, a question, a dialogue about a binary issue where the vast majority of humanity is affected, directly affected by what media and images and whatnot say. And so we have to keep good humor, and we have to very much listen to people on these issues, as well as speak. There's a lot of people who want to be heard and want to be validated on this issue and a great many others. The problem is no one is seeming willing to validate their perceived opponent so that there can be true dialogue and a true exchange of ideas. And that is what has disturbed me about all these gender issues and debates about gender representation in the media. It's the same fight. It's the same fight over and over and over again, and it's just getting more vicious and more angry, and more people are opting out, and we're not getting anywhere. There's no substantive discussion going on, except among like-minded people. Like, I've seen little Shades of Grey, not 50 Shades of Grey, the original meaning of Shades of Grey, discussions going on with people of, you know, like when that Manara cover came out, people are like, well, yeah, it's not his best work, for sure, but this is an overreaction. You know, and there are some people that thought it was great. They thought it, you know, for whatever reason. I have a particular squick, just personally, about super long backs. So that completely freaks me out. Giraffe-like bodies just freak me out. This isn't intellectual at all. It's just a personal, you know, unnaturally, right? Unnaturally. When it's clearly photoshopped, like they take a swimsuit model who already has an abnormally long torso because they're 6 feet freaking tall, and the Photoshop makes it longer. Freaks me out. Doesn't feel natural. There's this like brainstem level repelled quality. I get it. It's like, I can't be logical about it because it's just, but that's personal, right? That's personal. Now, you know, we have to get into the question of, are we starting to lose what real human bodies look like? I mean, that is a legitimate concern. You know, for men as well as women, we're seeing these, you know, if you look at male superhero physiques in film, you know, starting, let's say, you know, George Reeves as Superman back in, George Reeve. I always get it confused. Christopher Reeve, George Reeves, I think. I don't know. I'm confused now. I'll look it up after I stop recording. But if you look at George Reeves' Superman back in the day, he was a good-looking dude, but he wasn't a Rob Liefeld character. Sorry, Rob Liefeld, you're sort of the poster boy for the dudes out there. And as, you know, we move into, I mean, the 80s were a big defining moment about the change in the appearance of male action leads, because we had that Stallone and Schwarzenegger literally steroid-fueled beefcake cinema of the 1980s. And is that any healthier for male body image than, you know, unnatural depictions of women? Well, eating disorders for men and, you know, abuse of substances for men started increasing, so, you know, there's something to be concerned of there. And I mean, you hear all these, the fact that they're publishing the diets of actors who play superheroes now, like, it's the diets? Like, these diets are not sustainable on a daily basis, is the thing. Like, these guys don't look normal. Even bodybuilders don't look like that all the time. They cycle, because otherwise your body gets used to it and starts compensating, because you're not supposed to look like that. And we have to keep that in mind. And I would like to see more varied body types. I like the fact that, you know, Spider-Man is traditionally, like, skinnier. He's still got muscles, but he's leaner. He looks more like a martial artist than, you know, Thor's a big beefcake guy. And yeah, we sort of expect Thor to look beefy because he's a god and all that stuff, although he's an alien now. But, you know, he's essentially the god of thunder. So, you know, and Iron Man, we don't really care because he's in a suit. So, you know, lucky for Robert Downey Jr., he just has to look healthy. He doesn't have to look like, you know, Hugh Jackman in the various Wolverine movies, that he gets veinier and veinier in every movie. And I don't really think Wolverine would actually look like that. They draw him really muscular because that's how they draw everybody in comics, but I don't really think Wolverine in the real world would look, based on the amount of beer he drinks, he wouldn't look like that. He'd have some water retention. He wouldn't have that definition, right? So we're not showing particularly realistic depictions of men either, if we're completely honest about the whole thing. Now, expectations in general culture are a much bigger deal, but it's important to keep in mind that media is often a reflection of culture as much, if not more, than a driver of culture. Media is about appealing to trends. It's very rare they start them. Except for the fashion industry, which forces us to wear cycling garbage 4 seasons a year. Like, don't even get me started on that one. I'm not a fashionista, can you tell? But anyway, that's sort of my very lengthy breakdown on this and the issues surrounding it. Hoping to be constructive. That's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to give people an alternative to the screaming. And, you know, I'm still trying to figure out where I go. The videos on subjects like this are very popular, but they're also very controversial. And I admit I'm hesitant to do more because I don't want to constantly live in a raging shitstorm. So I'm trying to find a happy medium where I can talk about this stuff because people seem to really appreciate it for the most part. But people also get really nasty and start lying about me personally instead of focusing on my ideas and challenge my ideas. Challenge my thesis on these things. Challenge what I'm saying. Don't start digging it, trying to dig in and find, you know, things and take them out of context and twist them to make me seem like what? Like what, a hypocrite? A liar? Come on. If you can't debate me head on, if you can't take these opinions and say this is why this opinion on this issue is faulty, you don't have an argument. Because people are not simple. People make mistakes. People are not 100% consistent in everything they do. People get drunk and tweet crap. People tweet angry. Not every tweet is a 140 character snapshot of a person's character. Like, come on. Come on. For all you know, a friend took the person's phone to prank them. Like, it's silly. The way we attack the person, not the argument. Like, going through these tweets and archiving shit and all this stuff, it's a form of ad hominem argument. You're trying to attack the person's character and not their arguments. You don't need to. It doesn't matter if you think I'm the biggest transphobic, racist asshole because I'm not talking about transgendered stuff and I'm not talking about race here, right? You know, it's silly to think I'm either of those things based on numerous things I've done, but people have the right to their opinion about me. That doesn't discount what I'm saying here. And if you have to go there, if you have to go to that indirect attack, you might have to wonder why you can't find anything wrong with the argument in front of you. Okay? Food for thought, guys. Please be decent to each other. That's all I ask.